Julie, I think the logical place to start here is why you're running, and especially given all of the passions you have and the pursuits that you're engaged in and the boards you serve on a bigger scale than your own home community. This is a big job and it takes a lot of time, and it inevitably will result in your needing to make compromises with other things. So tell us what it is that's driving you to run and give up some of those other passions.
Sure thing. Well, thanks, Bill, first of all, to you and your team for making this opportunity available to candidates and to the public. As I considered throwing my hat in the ring, I watched many of your former interviews. I thought it would be a great way to really understand what I was in for. And so I really did find them to be quite instructive. And if any future person is watching me, may you learn from my mistakes, and anything I managed to do well, take those tips. I decided to run because I love this city. I have been a homeowner here since 2000. That's 22 years. But I got here in 1985 as a Stanford freshman when University Avenue's traffic lights blinked red starting at about 10 p.m. It was a sleepy little college town at the time in 1985. And boy, has it transformed itself into a magnificent world-class city, as Stanford has transformed itself into a world-class university in the same time frame. So I've been here a long time. In this American moment where I've been feeling rather helpless about some of the changes that are afoot well beyond Palo Alto, I've wanted to get more involved in solving the problems that we face in this American moment. And I came to appreciate that we've got some pretty intractable problems here in Palo Alto that I think I can lend my talents and time to. So I would summarize those as housing, grade separation, climate, how our kids are doing in terms of their mental health. Cubberley, we just seem to have been at an impasse. Our city's leadership, staff, and electeds combined, plus the residents who have a huge voice, of course, we seem to be at a repeating set of impasses and gridlocks, which concerns me because I'm interested in our city making forward progress. And that leads me to why I think I can be of use. I am a lawyer, haven't practiced in a long time, but you can't take that way of thinking out of a person. I analyze problems. I know when to ask the right question at the right time. But I've also got, this huge heart for humans thriving. That's what my work has been about for a couple decades now, whether as a Stanford dean or on numerous boards, writing books. I really, in the most cheesy sense, believe in all of us, Bill. I don't think life is a race one person wins. I don't think we win as a society unless we all make it. That makes me a pretty progressive liberal Democrat. And I believe wholeheartedly in that imperative. So I think I've got the analytical skills. I think I've got the breadth in terms of having sat on boards, trying to put together a strategic plan or trying to really motivate staff to do things differently, or having to make a tough decision, in tough times. Like during the Great Recession, I had to winnow a team at Stanford down through layoffs and rebuild a sense of our mission. I've been through difficult times with groups. I've also had the chance to set exciting vision. And I think I'm good at that. I think I'm good at galvanizing people around an idea. I enjoy that. So in terms of the last part of your question, what would I cut back on? The beauty of being self-employed, which I am, is I'm my own boss. So I have to ask myself, Julie, what is it that you want to do in the coming year, in the coming 4 years, and what are you not going to do accordingly? I've already given my agent who books me, the heads up, I'm running for city council. Should I win, I'm going to have to cut back on what I do elsewhere. That said, I don't think you should have to be retired or independently wealthy to serve your city. So I will be one of those people who does have to earn my income, as I know others on the council do. I think that should be possible. I think we're really in a dangerous place, actually, if we make it impossible for a person to have a professional life as well as try to serve our city.
Jocelyn, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to ask another question? Or are you still having your technical difficulties?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm a little unstable in the Wi-Fi, but who isn't? Yeah, I'd love to follow up with you, Julie, on what you just said about the gridlock, us feeling like we're at an impasse between the residents, the council members, the staff. So I'm wondering where you see the potential for improvement in this dialogue so that the gridlock is busted through. Is it that the council isn't being efficient and decisive in directing city staff? Is it that city staff have too many projects and they're just kind of spinning their wheels, moving a little bit at a time? Is it the community dialogue that just doesn't seem to be able to come to a consensus? Where do you think you can make a difference in that, all of that?
So as an outsider to the process, I'm wary of making pronouncements about who is failing at what. I think that's pretty arrogant, which is why during the forum the other night, I did not weigh in with a grade for Ed Shikata, because I just think I'm not yet in the position of judging him as an employee. And it just felt a little bit much of a stretch for me, given my outsider status. I do think it's probably a little bit of all of it. I've seen council, for example, really drag their heels on Castellea, assess them a huge fine for growing without permission. And, in the criminal justice system, when you pay a fine, you've done your time, it's like you pay the fine, you did your time, now you move on. But Castellea didn't get to move on. They paid a fine and then they had to slog through this process that at the end just ground to an excruciating halt. And I was frankly almost embarrassed for us as a city as I sat there in chambers listening to council members interrogating on questions like, the noise the girls make when they splash in the pool, how are we going to guard against that? And the sound of the buzzer on the parking garage, and how many exceptions will the junior class have to drive? I thought, really? Is this really the work of elected officials? Can't we trust that these smart people who run Castellea, now that they've had their hands slapped for past behaviors, are going to do better this time? So I think that's an example of not knowing when to back off, or when to trust, or when to just get out of the weeds and stop micromanaging. I think we have a great staff. They're hardworking, they're highly educated, they're proud to work in our city. And as a former board member, I know my job is not to be in the weeds with them. My job is to hire good staff and trust that they can proceed in implementing the vision that we've set as the board or as the city leaders. So I'm going to be really curious about that. If elected, I'm going to be very curious about how far can the staff go without us, having to kind of check in, because that would be the more healthy relationship. And finally, to residents, we are in a place where the residents' will prevails in ways that at times feel anarchic. I live on Maybell Way. It is a cul-de-sac off of Maybell Avenue. And I don't need to tell you what happened with Measure D. I was in favor of the housing the council approved. And then a set of residents, as you well know, decided, not going to happen. I have also been the homeowner who bought a dilapidated house that needed tremendous repairs and had a nasty process with neighbors really being cruel. And I have, as a result, been that neighbor who welcomes every new family when they come. Great to meet you. Let's have an event. Trying to do my part to improve the civility and the knowing of one another that I think ultimately leads to us being able to break through impasses. So that's the big answer. We've got to do a better job of really authentically, kindly, vulnerably sharing. When people are acting out, it means they're afraid somewhere. And we've got to be brave enough to say, let's talk about that fear you have about how your neighborhood might change. Let's get away from the labels and really to the more universal feelings we have of my life might change if this happens. I don't feel safe. I'll be the council person. I have a track record for talking with people about difficult stuff and making space for people to open up about how they feel and ultimately build bridges. So that's frankly what's needed to solve the biggest problems we face, whether grade separations or building 6,086 housing units or Cubberley. We're gonna have to have brave, heartfelt conversations, investing in human relationships. That's the way forward.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to say, I actually respected what you said at the forum about not wanting to jump in and grade someone in front of 300 other people. I understand where you're coming from. on that. So thank you for that. I also think that, of course, the council is responsible for the performance of the city manager. So
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
some evaluation and opinion on that is helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed with that. I just felt personally ill-equipped. Like it's not my place at this moment to really assess Ed at all. And again, as an out, some of the people are on utilities commission, planning commission, they're in a much better position. I'm not yet there.
For sure.
Julie, the two examples that you've cited to articulate an answer to that question, Maybell and Castellea, I think it's fair to say that in both instances, it boiled down to a matter of lost trust in the decision makers,
Yeah.
both at the staff level and at the council level. And so while your vision for not micromanaging and for trying to build that consensus that you're talking about is all great, the job of the city council is to go through the various steps that are needed to either approve or reject or modify these proposals. And if there's not that underlying trust by the community in that process, then we're going to see this happen repeatedly. We're washing and repeating, and that's what you're describing as what you've noticed about local government. So I want to just push you a little further as to if you're actually on the city council having to abide by the city attorney's direction about what you can and cannot talk about and go through the approval process and only listen to the public as they come before you. How do you build that trust? You're only one of 7.
Mm-hmm.
How do you coalesce with your colleagues and with city management to build more trust in the community by the community?
It's interesting that you pointed out, Bill, the rules, the legal ramifications, what you may and may not say. I remember being in council chambers a 3 months ago, and a woman came and spoke up in the open public session about something that was sort of off topic, and all she was told was, that's off topic, this is not the right time to bring it. And she looked embarrassed, and she apologized, and my heart was aching for somebody to pull her aside and say, but let us tell you how better to address your concerns. And that can be a fairly entry-level staff person who could do that, or even just a kind word from a council member, to offer one more step to that person who was sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Outside of the procedural challenges, I like Greg Tanaka's open office hours. I'm going to be an office hours person. Like, come talk to me. I might do it down here at Hobie's down here on El Camino near where I live. Like, let's grab coffee. Let's talk. When people, as I said in response to the prior question, relationships really are the marrow of good decision-making. And what I've learned is that when people know you well enough and feel that they've been respected by you in the manner in which you talk with them, even if they don't ultimately, when you've made a decision, agree with the decision, there's enough respect for who you are and how you are that they're like, you know what, I may not agree with this entirely, but I trust Julie, and because I know her. So I think it's fundamentally, this is not, New York or Manhattan. This is Palo Alto, 67,000 residents. It is really possible for us to develop a greater knowing with the people we're trying to represent and serve.
So I think that one of the benefits of this endorsement interview process is that we get to dive in a little bit deeper on some things that you've said in questionnaires and
in the debate, in the forums, to finish Jocelyn's sentence. And let me just pick it up and ask you in the vein that, well, there she is. You want to continue your question?
I am so sorry. I've got to turn on my Wi-Fi booster.
No problem.
Why don't you go ahead with that? I'll ask my question in a minute. Okay.
Okay. So I'd like to shift gears now to the question of housing and allow you to answer more deeply than whatever number of seconds you were given
right.
On Tuesday night. You're obviously a strong proponent of housing and diversity of the community, and I want to hear from you how as we try to add more housing, and where the likeliest targets are for doing that, will often be to replace housing that is old and ready for redevelopment. How we avoid displacing the most affordable housing we have in the community by redeveloping it. And I'm thinking of the apartments along Alma, apartments elsewhere in the midsection of Palo Alto, basically housing that's been here for 60, 70 years. And that's the least expensive housing we have for renters in this community is where developers will go if we give them incentives to build more housing, which would result in more housing, but it's not going to be affordable. So how do you reconcile those tensions as you set out to expand the housing supply in Palo Alto?
Well, Bill, thanks for pointing out this. I think it's like 1,507 units that are affordable, that are kind of nearing the end of their affordability term. And we've got to make sure we protect those. And that has nothing to do with the quality of the unit in terms of the quality of the building, but more of a contractual situation where they could revert to market. And we've got to make sure that we don't displace anybody. And so I actually reject the idea that, I mean, I hear you that from a developer's perspective, the easiest or most logical place may be refurbishing those, but we cannot abide a situation where a whole bunch of people get displaced for 18 to 24 months while that happens, unless we have some place to relocate them. So, you know, we've got relocation assistance for no fault evictions. We've got that concept in place for helping people find something else when their housing gets jostled. But I don't think that's the right way to approach the housing element. You know, my two solutions are, well, my meta solution is 6,086 units must be shared across this magnificent city in different ways. Mm-hmm. So greater density in the downtown and Cal Ave, mixed use developments on El Camino. Where I live in South Palo Alto, El Camino is a blight. You know, I've got just stores nobody wants to go into, potholes in my streets. It just doesn't feel like Palo Alto at all. So, you know, a revitalized El Camino with retail on the bottom, multifamily housing atop. San Antonio a little bit, but not the lion's share. You know, some on San Antonio, some on El Camino, some Cal Ave, some University. But then here's the kicker: ADUs or whatever other use you want to make of SB9 duplexes in our residential neighborhoods. And I'm going to say something radical if that already wasn't radical enough. You know, I've been inspired by San Jose. They have an ADU ally on staff. She has something called ADU Tuesdays, where that's the expedited day to come get your ADU kind of pre-approved. And they've got pre-approved developers who will develop it. Some are even prefabbed. If you want that, you know, they're making it super easy and making the point that some people need the income that will come from splitting their lot and, you know, creating that second house. And so this is the missing conversation, at least the conversations I've had lately. Nobody's talking about this. Some of our residents need the income that would come from going the ADU route in single family neighborhoods. And the final thing I'll say there is, what if we said that every block, like to really own this in like a World War II, you know, the Nazis are coming, you know, like we've all got to pull together. I'm sorry, it's sort of inappropriate, but like my mother's a British person who lived through that. And she tells these stories about how they all pulled together to turn the lights off. So when the Nazis were flying over, they wouldn't know there was a village below. Like, we're at that point with housing, like it's a disaster. And the state is going to come and remove our local control if we don't act on our housing element this time around in a timely fashion. So instead of just giving up or planning to continually sue the state or be sued by them, like, let's band together, Palo Alto, and every block pick, you know, a place for a fourplex. And then let's take those impact fees that the developer would normally pay to the city. Let's distribute them to the neighbors. Like, yeah, it's impacting you, so everyone's going to share the impact fee. Like, I think we can get creative at solving this problem of distributing these units all around. And, you know, I'm excited about that, frankly. I mean, we've got to envision a city with a whole lot more housing, and I want an all hands on deck, social media fueled, sloganized, we're doing this, it's the right thing to do kind of approach to this.
But you've got a very divided city in terms of their endorsement of that approach. So do you first need to persuade those that don't want this, that it's good for them?
Absolutely. And this is why I was speaking specifically to those among us who need it financially, right? There are plenty of wealthy people here who have all, their home is one of the assets and they have other assets, but there are people among us who are not doing anywhere near as financially well as their neighbors. And if they were to be told, you know what, let us walk you through, easily how you would split that lot. You don't have to be the one to develop it. You could sell off that back half to someone who wants it and walk away with big cash. Some people need that. And so I think having these kind of coffee type conversations, like, let us tell you how the ADU actually works and see if we can get some volunteers, just like we're looking for volunteers for the SCAP, 1,000 people to switch their furnace to a electric heat pump. Like, we're hoping for volunteers. I think we could get behind that on the ADU in single family neighborhood areas. I really think we do. I think there are people out there who need it. Let me say one last thing. The ADUs are not going to solve our problem, but I've seen research that says that the state assumes that 5% of all properties are suitable for ADU. Well, when you look at our allocation, 6,000 units have to be built, and you look at the number of properties we have in Palo Alto, I've calculated that we could get if we could get 750 ADUs, it would really, it's a likely number, and it'll help us toward that huge RENA number. So I think ADUs are an important part of the solution. A small fraction, but an important fraction, because it will build buy-in across the city.
So apart from the ADUs, in areas such as El Camino, where you point out it's just primed for development, although it has so many different owners that collecting those sites together is probably one of the major challenges. But what do you envision there? Do you envision the kind of medium height buildings that we're seeing in Mountain View go up along El Camino? And how do you feel about the 50-foot height limit? Where would you change that to allow for higher density apartment or condo units?
So I really have been looking to Redwood City and Mountain View. I know Redwood City has called their effort a precise plan for their downtown. I know Mountain View's got a specific plan, and a bunch of different projects have been approved under it. Frankly, I'm not in the weeds enough to understand the nuanced differences between specific and precise and comprehensive area plan. But I'm bringing this up because I know we do need a plan. And we've had a good plan. The SOFA coordinated area plan was beautiful. Like, look at that. Look at that as a model of how we can have multifamily and mixed use and trees and walkability and the character of Palo Alto. Like, I would love to see 20 different SOFA developments. I don't know what the numbers are, but throughout the city as an example. Look, that's an example of we've done it before. Let's figure out how we did that and let's do it again. In terms of El Camino specifically, yes, Bill, we need to raise the height limit. I don't know if it's 1 story or 2. Paris is a 6-story city, and it's a damn beautiful city. I wouldn't go higher than 6, but I do think we need 4 and 5, maybe 6 in some places. I don't know the entirety of El Camino to tell you well enough to tell you, like, do this here, do this here. But, this is, it should just be done in clumps all the way along, because it's just it used to be the King's Road, and now it just looks like, so raise the height limit. I don't know, Santana Row comes to mind. I think somebody said that at a recent council meeting, maybe Tom Du Bois or somebody. A destination. What I love about Redwood City right now, which you could not have said 10 years ago, you go there and there's live music at night and people are gathering, they're walking, and it's retail and it's restaurants and it's young people and older people. El Camino in places could be that. And it's good for us to have that kind of community engagement. And I think, El Camino could be that place.
You're certainly painting a picture of vibrance that I'm sure many people would appreciate. But I'm kind of wondering, the idea of developing housing near transit, certainly very popular. Everyone wants to put denser housing near transit. However, we've seen in Palo Alto that public transit is not particularly robust. I mean, we're at the north end of the county.
Yeah.
San Jose gets the lion's share of the funding. So if elected, how would you work with the transit agencies to improve the transportation options so that when we do have high density car light kind of development, the people there can easily get to wherever they need to go and they're not stranded?
Well, you're talking to a kid, a former kid, who grew up in Reston, Virginia, which was a planned community, one of the original planned communities in America, built in the 60s, still going strong, roughly the size of Palo Alto today, where everybody lived in multifamily residential neighborhoods, single family, duplex, apartment, townhome, all next to each other, beautiful black walking paths to walk to groceries, retail, jobs, transit, recreation, schools. And so I was a 5th through 8th grader in that community. I didn't realize it was so special. And I keep picturing Reston when I think about the future of like where Palo Alto wants to get. I picture like the NV cap area as like, okay, that's going to have the big affordable unit. It's going to have the townhomes. It's going to have the historic cannery. It's going to have some open space. Like that's starting to feel like something that, has a sense of we and real beauty to it. So that's just a generic thought. The second thought is seamless Bay Area is something I'm 100% behind. This is an Adina Levin nonprofit. And, she's trying to move us from 27 separate transit authorities in the Bay to one, with one management group in charge where all of it is integrated. Caltrain, BART, buses, light rail, all of it. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. I'm 54, but maybe by the time I'm 94, God willing, like we'll have that and be a proper metro area. So I make this point because I do think it is imperative as leaders for us not to be thinking about where are people going to bike next month, but how are people going to live in 30 years and really be building that city. In the meantime, I'm excited that we have our Measure B funding for grade separation, and that allows that we've got the business tax, not as high as I wanted, but it's going to kick off enough money for us to demonstrate with that plus Measure B that we've earned the matching funds that would come from the feds. Like we're going to get the grade separation. That's going to happen. And, safe for pedestrians and bikers and all of that. In the very, very immediate term, I think we have to narrate to get on your bike, walk more. We need to bring back that shuttle that they closed in the pandemic. I think it's absurd, frankly, having grown up not here, that school children are driven to school and back by their parents, and that you have hundreds of cars every day taking kids to our elementary, middle, and high schools when those parents need to be at their jobs or looking after younger children or just having a higher quality life. So I want to see that shuttle come back. I'd love to partner with Stanford. Maybe if we can't have our own shuttle, Marguerite can be expanded so that we can all get, around our city on a free, hopefully green shuttle. I think that's our immediate answer. And I'm told it's not that expensive. And I think partnerships with Stanford are going to get more affordable because they're going to try for the GUP again. And as I'm a Stanford and Palo Alto person, both of those places are deep in my bones. So I intend to be as effective as possible at negotiating with Stanford the things we jointly need to create this thriving region.
Probably a good time to shift to the Caltrain and the grade crossings.
Yeah.
It sounded to me like, I think it was at the forum, maybe it was someplace else where I heard you, that you, like many people, would love to have the tracks underground, but that day has passed, it would seem. And in your response to our survey, you talk in terms of the basically under crossings at the various places where we need them to get rid of the grade crossings. If it was a year ago and all the options were still on the table, would you have a different favorite?
Yeah, I actually mentioned, I think at the forum, that I like the viaduct. I just like the train in a completely different place than the people. I am worried if the train is neither way up here or down in the ground, and I realize it's complicated for both. I'm really worried about our connectability to each other. We know that Oregon, when it came in, divided the city north, south, and it's important that we needed Oregon. We've got it. We got a whole lot of things because we have Oregon Expressway. But looking ahead, you know, we are a place with this character and we cherish each other. And I'm worried about a massive wall from the hybrid option or these underpass, you know, like just the citification, the urbanization that will come with either the hybrid or the underpass. I'm worried about the visibility of one another. What I'd liked about the viaduct idea was, what if we could then redevelop the space underneath it for farmers markets and, you know, a jogging path and dog parks and kind of like, you know, almost like the High Line in New York, but the train would be up and the equivalent of the High Line, a fun place to meander and walk and run into people well planted, you know, could be a beautiful thing. So I realize, you know, the viaduct doesn't seem to be on the table, but I think in my heart of hearts, you know, not being a civil engineer, just as a resident, that's what I prefer.
Well, as Jocelyn and Gennady know, that's always been my favorite. I did my best to try to get that more seriously considered. But I think it illustrates a problem we have in this community where the council, regardless of what the issue is, keeps trying to make it so everyone is satisfied and everyone is happy. And the concept of the common good and making a decision on behalf of the entire community rather than trying to please everyone affected by something keeps coming up over and over again. And the reason the viaduct was dismissed, and I don't think it's too late to bring it up again, depending on who's elected, but I do think that it's a perfect example of where the only people that really objected to the viaduct were the people that were fearful of the noise that they thought would be greater than the noise now, even with electric trains, which I think is probably not true. And that they thought it would become a place where people would hang out and get into trouble, and the kind of usage that you're talking about, instead of being a positive, were perceived as potentially a big negative. But from a cost standpoint and from a cost disruption of construction,
Right.
Viaduct actually has some appealing aspects to it. But how do you, please address this issue of trying to please everyone and recognizing that sometimes people are just going to be unhappy with the decision that the council makes.
Bill, you're asking me, Julie, how will you succeed where others have failed?
Yes.
I mean, you know, I remember when Gerhard Casper would say that at Stanford, you know, a freshman parent would say, too much alcohol. And, you know, ultimately he would say, madam, it's hard for the university to succeed where parents have failed. You know, in that Gerhard way he had about him. I think we're afraid of our residents. I think it's not just the residents who are afraid of some decisions being made. I think leadership seems to be afraid of residents. And I don't know if that's a I won't get reelected concern. You know, I'll be the sort of leader that tries to do what's right. If I'm elected but don't get reelected because I fought, you know, to make something happen that was right for the common good, but a bunch of people didn't like, I'm going to feel proud of myself. Like, fine, I didn't get reelected, but at least I got that done, you know, or helped get that done. It gets to our identity, Bill, as a we. Who is Palo Alto? I think it would be beneficial to go through a community convening around our values, about what we want, what we need. I think, you know, we've got Stanford right up the street. People can help us facilitate a deep conversation about our future. We are at an existential place. And I don't think housing projects should be decided on a parcel by parcel basis without having a bigger vision. I don't think questions about, the Caltrain electrification, what we're going to do for grade separation, should happen in response to this neighborhood doesn't like it. Like, we have to be bigger than that. We have to actually I might even get the Institute for the Future people, Jane McGonigal's people in downtown, and ask them, help us have a conversation about 2070. In your questionnaire, you said 2050. Let's go even farther. In 2070 or 2100, when all the present parties are almost all gone, what will it be? When we can take ourselves out of it, it's like, I need this, this is right for me. And instead be trying to hand an asset forward to the next generations. That's the kind of inspirational, aspirational conversation we need to have. And some people are going to lose, and we have to try to compensate them somehow for things that they, that they're missing out on, and thank them profusely for the sacrifices they make. We have to narrate to a we instead of an I. It's the only way, frankly, we're going to get climate change. Get our SCAP goals met. The next set of SCAP goals require individuals to stop driving gas cars and individuals to swap out all the gas and natural gas they're using in their houses. And if it's only about my house, my wallet, my aesthetics, we're never going to get there. We have to narrate to a bigger level of we. I realize that doesn't sound practical. There are processes associated with doing that. And that's where I think we are. I think we are literally having conversations about our future in the most existential, important, and exciting sense.
Yeah, and of course, the city has attempted that conversation numerous times before in the course of comprehensive planning and lots of community involvement and so forth. I think one of the problems is that those processes drag on for so long that by the time they're done, half the people that were involved in the process have moved on. And new people have come in who say, well, nobody asked us about this. And so you're just caught in this, never ending attempt to make everybody feel listened to and participative.
Okay, so let's use Cubberley as an agile, to use a business term I sort of understand, as an agile example, as a kind of hot button opportunity to innovate. We've got to bring the school district and the city back to the table. The school does not need a third high school in the next 80 years is projected. Okay, that's not a need. We need a vibrant community center. The school can either do the school district can ground lease it to us, or we do a land swap. But we've got school board members that want to make that happen. We have council candidates that want to make that happen. I would say let's make it a contest, man. Let's gamify it. Like, what can we achieve in 8 weeks of rapid conversation? Whatever the rules need to be, like, come on, let's do it. Because if we do it and it's mixed use and we put housing, that becomes the first example of a coordinated area plan where we've got mixed use and housing and we've figured it all out. And then we learn from it, like, okay, we screwed some of it up, some of it's good. Now what are we going to do in this place on El Camino? I think Cubberley turns out to be the catalyst of possibility.
Yeah, a lot of people felt that way or still do feel that way. Jocelyn?
Yeah, let's turn our attention to business and small business for a second, because we're, coming out of the pandemic, economic recovery is a priority for the city. And yet we kind of look across different neighborhoods and different business districts, and we have some businesses that are just trying to thrive with different restrictions, and then others that are just saying, like, this closed street isn't working for me. And there doesn't seem to be anything particularly coordinated. The city doesn't have someone in charge, for the economic development and addressing the business needs. So what do you think is needed at this point to really rally behind the businesses? And I know in one of your surveys, you said that there's an insufficiency of residents, honestly, and that more residents need to move into the areas around Cal Ave and downtown. That's kind of a longer term vision, but what can help us move the business community kind of forward at this point?
So Jocelyn, you've just alluded to one of my favorite visuals in my mind, which is the ecosystem that is a thriving city, and how when we don't have affordable housing, young families can't move here. So they can't send their kids to our schools, which means our schools are going to have to close. I mean, that's what's coming, right? Okay, do you want to close Walter Hayes, Duveneck, or Addison, or all three at some point because young families can't afford to live there anymore? How are the residents going to feel about that when our whole value as Palo Altans, our land value is so largely based on our having these magnificent schools? Like, come on, we've got to fix our ecosystem. And on businesses, if people can't afford to live here, they're not going to frequent the stores. And with the pandemic showing all the white collar tech, office type businesses, like you can work from home, we've got ghost towns. So we're desperate for revitalization. I think somebody in charge, just like I want us to have an ADU ally in the planning department who can have her ADU Tuesdays like San Jose does and really give people the package so that they can get that done. I'd love to see a small business ally who can be recruiting, who can be incentivizing, just helping people with the process. I also think we need to tax business owners, landlords that have shuttered businesses. I know that, or I don't know if it's a tax or a fine, but San Francisco has done this. X amount of months with a storefront closed, you're going to start paying money to incentivize them to lease it to someone. We've got to get business back in. And I think that's a pretty good way. The third thing I'm going to say is we've got to get young people excited about frequenting shops in their city. So it's easy to order a meal on DoorDash or Waiters on Wheels. What we want is for people to be walking into our local businesses. So I think we need a social media campaign, with a cute hashtag, and it would really get young people, to develop it and get them fired up about, you get a discount. You're a resident here, you're going to get whatever percent is the right percentage off for eating here. You bring in 5 friends, you get a bigger discount, something like that. Make it fun. Again, gamify it. Make it something people are excited to be a part of, and watch how behavior shifts.
We just have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that Janati and Adam don't have questions that they want to make sure get answered here before we turn things off. Janati?
I want to follow up on something you said earlier on when we were talking about housing. You mentioned Redwood City and Mountain View as kind of examples of places that have used these specific plans to build a ton of new housing. But one of the ways they did that is by allowing a lot of commercial space as part of the specific plans to give developers a financial incentive to then build housing. And in Palo Alto, that approach has been kind of rejected over the years.
Yeah.
And when I brought it up at the forum, one of the candidates immediately said it's a disaster because we don't want to do more offices. So how would you create a plan that follows the model of Redwood City and Mountain View without allowing lots and lots of office space? Or would you be okay with allowing lots and lots of office space?
I don't, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We don't need more office space. We have a 3-to-1 jobs housing imbalance. So we need to get offices, local businesses into the space. And, but I would not like to see us build much more. I am interested in market rate housing to help float the affordable. Okay. I like the 20%. I want it to be affordable for developers. Let's raise the height limit. Let's increase density so it can pencil out. I mean, they're telling us to build 6,000 units. If we built 18,000 units, we could do all the affordable through market rate with 20% BMR. Like, I'm not saying we need 18,000 units, and please, that's not what I'm saying. Anybody, don't quote me as saying that. It's a hypothetical. I'm just talking about ways to make the math work. No, in that sense, we don't need all the new office space that Redwood City has come up with. We need housing.
Okay, so the market rate would subsidize the affordable as opposed to
absolutely. I do like some 100% affordable, but frankly, those are best for people at the extremely low income and maybe the very low income to extremely low income, where they need the wraparound services that come from a Life Moves or an Alta housing, where they can get the support they need to really lift themselves up to that next level. I do worry about ghettoization. Too many 100% here. We start to have sort of a feeling of a project. We don't want that. We want everybody, regardless of income, really well integrated into whatever neighborhood they're in. So I'm wary of too much 100%. It's also really hard to finance, but it does serve its purpose in unique circumstances like Wilton Court.
What about building it on public property?
What about it?
Well, that saves your land costs, which is a huge factor in Palo Alto. So by using parking lots, converting parking lots to,
Yeah. Yeah. I've looked at the housing element, parking lot, parking lot, parking lot, parking lot, parking lot. We're just gonna, yes, obviously we save the cost of the land. I guess I wouldn't want every solution like that. I would want to take a look at that whole area, like, all right, this is where the 100% goes on a parking lot, but over here is where we're going to have BMR with, market rate with some BMR folded in, and again, take into account the whole area.
well, currently we have BMR housing scattered all over the place, and nobody knows that it's even BMR housing. And
Right.
that's what you're wanting to continue,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Yeah, I don't think putting a BMR housing on a city parking lot, if it's done well, is going to be an eyesore or a
Yeah.
ghetto.
Yeah.
Especially if it's in a more urbanized part of the community.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Adam, do you have any questions that you want to get in here?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Can I ask one more? Sorry.
I got
Yeah,
what
go
you.
ahead, Janai.
Yeah.
And Jocelyn.
Well, you were the only person who actually answered my question at the forum about fair and unbiased policing. I just wanted to get your take about how you feel the city has done since May 2020 and the George Floyd demonstrations. I know there's been a lot of reforms around A Can't Wait. There's been conversations at the Human Relations Commission's level. I'm curious whether you think the city could have or should have done more, and would you support any further initiatives to kind of support police reforms?
I really appreciated that you asked that question, and I happened to go last, just the way it worked. And I really struggled with how to address the fact that most of the respondents had gone a bit afield from your original question. It's hard as the one Black candidate in the race to speak about race without appearing to speak too much about race. Frankly, it's something that I have to constantly keep in mind. But I tried to thread that needle live that night. This is something we must never take our eyes off of. Andrew Binder, by all accounts, is terrific. What I've heard from him, what I've heard from Dennis Burns, is a lot of, what we might call they're both very judicious, right? But people who needed to move on and retire have. And so whatever, maybe not all the problems we have in the department, but many of those individuals are no longer with us, which is great. And so it means continuing to hire the right people, promote the right people, give them the opportunity to grow in their capacity as law enforcement officers in the context of America and George Floyd, continual training around undoing implicit bias, which we all are subject to. I am subject to it. I can stand up in front of law enforcement and say, don't be ashamed you're biased. I am also. But knowing we are biased, we must do something about it, particularly when we carry guns and tasers. HRC is good and also problematic. They convened 100 circles about race. And I had some really uncomfortable conversations as a person of color invited to be a part of those conversations. And I ended up being reported out as sort of uncooperative. And I was like, not trying to be uncooperative. It was sort of very ironic that, a Black person invited to join a conversation who expressed why that might be difficult for me was then reported as, so it speaks to the nuance, how hard it is to talk about race. I just want us to be a city where we're always saying, you know what, we're always going to do better. We can always do better. And look, my sadness from Tuesday night was I didn't mention Asian people. Asian people are experiencing hate crimes in our region and around the country. As an African-American, my heart breaks when I see, an innocent person of any race, and particularly when it's a person of color, harmed. And so, we've got to create community, not just law enforcement, but a community of kindness where everyone is presumed to belong and nobody, gets away with mistreating anybody. I also think the PERT program is wonderful. I've met the officer and the mental health practitioner who travel together. We just need that ×4, because so often, particularly when it's a person of color and they seem to be acting out and problematic, it's a mental health issue and they lose their lives instead of, being taken to an appropriate supportive facility. So always keep our eye on it, always hold ourselves to a higher standard that everybody in the city will be treated with a presumption of innocence and belonging, and will be treated with dignity and kindness.
Julie, would you support trying to negotiate out of the binding arbitration part of the union contract? That is one of the more reform proposals that many think is standing in the way of further police reform.
Yeah, it's not an area of expertise for me, so I only know it at the level that you've just said it, Bill, but yes. But let me also say to you, as the Palo Alto Weekly people, the online comments section can be cruel. And as an example of how we must treat each other with dignity and kindness, I can only begin to imagine the efforts you have made. I want to ask that you consider not letting people post anonymously. The New York Times doesn't let you post anonymously, I don't think. You know, it's just, I have had awful things said about me. I've learned, don't read it, just don't read it. You know, someone could write a nice article about me and someone's going to say something mean, and at least they should put their name on it. I've also had a letter addressed to my house saying, you know, not terrible thing. Nobody's calling me the N-word, you know, but just unsigned. A Palo Alton, I presume, wrote, knowing I'm running for city council, you know, is sending me a letter without their name attached. It's cowardly, but sometimes it's more than that. It's cruel. And I think as the leaders in discourse, we can do better at setting expectations, you know, that our neighbors can be held to a higher standard of civility.
Well, let's continue that conversation offline, because we've made a lot of efforts to address those things, and getting rid of anonymous comments, there's no good way to do that without just shutting down the forum. And I think the forum has most of the people that participate are doing so in good faith and have a lot of good ideas and a lot of good discourse. It's the troublemakers that we're trying to weed out. And I think for the most part, we have done a good job at weeding them out.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I certainly know you do work at it, and I appreciate that.
Thanks.
In this spirit of, you know, we can continue to do better and hold ourselves to higher standards of engagement with one another, you know, from law enforcement to the comments in Palo Alto Online or Town Hall. You know, I think it's all in the mix.
Jocelyn,
that is actually my one question as coming into Embarcadero Media, whether or not you have any comments or thoughts that you'd like to share about our coverage and what we can do better, what you'd like to see, what we could maybe change, what would you think serve you better as a Palo Alton as well as a leader in our community, what we can do better to help inform the citizens of Palo Alto?
Well, you're a phenomenal organization. It's hard for me to say that and not sound like I'm just trying to butter you up.
Pandering.
I'm grateful that you're here. I love the fact that you were online before most places were. You know, a city of our size needs a very highly regarded journalistic enterprise, and you are it. So hats off to you. When I flipped through the neighborhood insert, you do a neighborhood insert, maybe, I don't know, once a year, whatever.
Once a year.
Yeah, I'm in the afterthought part of Palo Alto. I'm in Green Acres 2, which was sort of a next along with Barron Park. You know, we get like a little paragraph at the back. It's like Crescent Park and Southgate and this and that. It's like, and maybe that's because my neighborhood leaders didn't respond to your efforts to reach out, but it does. I want somebody on staff always paying attention to representation. What pictures are we using? Who are we featuring? When you add up the photos from the realtors, because it's of course paid for with real estate ads, plus your own coverage, there wasn't a lot of diversity of imagery. Which I noticed as a brown skin African-American biracial person here. And then just the way in which the neighborhoods were featured, the sort of lesser neighborhoods were sort of at the back of the publication. And I was the person that brought when my kids were at Briones, there was no Briones float in the Mayfete parade that year. And people were already saying, your kids are at Briones, they have bad test scores there. And I was like, they're not bad. They're just the lowest in Palo Alto, but that's because it's so diverse economically. The OH kids are there. It's more racially diverse. I want my kids there. I show up as a Briones parent and there's no float. And Walter Hayes has a float and Duvenick and all of them have floats. And that first year I was like, boy, this doesn't look good and it doesn't feel good. So I got myself on the float committee. And for 3 years, my partner and I wrangled people to build that float. And by year 3, we were winning awards. And that's the kind of person I am. Like, let's make sure we're all present. and really all represented in this magnificent concept we call Palo Alto.
That's a great place to end.
That's a good place to end, but I knew you had
Great.
another question, Jocelyn. Do you want to?
We'll just go there. That's
All
fine.
right. Thank you very much, Julie. It was great to speak with you, and best of luck in the rest of the campaign.
I really appreciate your process and all you're bringing, to the effort. It's really been quite informative, and I'm learning a lot regardless of what happens. I'm enjoying the process of knowing more people and learning a lot. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.